Hi all. Module 6 deals with reproductive cytology, and it's not a huge portion of our class this semester. I also tried to simplify this rotation a little bit because there's information you need to know, but there's also a lot that was just extra this week. So I redid the quiz, and I think it's appropriate. You may see some of those questions again on the midterm. So I want to start, well, first of all, by saying that I went through all the study questions and I did find all of them. All of the beginning ones, 1 through 5, were basically in the course in some of those notes. And then you'll need the Syrah for the last like 6 through 10, but you should be able to find the answers for all that. And in the lab this week, I know that you'll be doing some cases with vaginal cytology. So I wanted to just quickly go through the cytology that we use when classifying the different stages of estrus in the canine. And the handout that I sent you has this picture on it, which is kind of nice because it has both the non-cornified, which are the younger cells, known as the parabasal, which are these big bullseye-looking cells. And as they get a little bit older, they take on this look right here, but they're all pretty crisp and the nucleus is visible. And then as they age, when the dog starts to go into late proestrus and estrus, the cells age and they become much more angular and pycnotic. These are known as superficial cells, or that they're cornified. And the way I remember this is that old people get corns on their feet. So non-cornified cells would be the younger versions, and cornified would be the older versions. As far as our preparation techniques for this cytology, this is a swab smear, and the information on that is in the course as far as obtaining the sample. Real quickly, if you are involved in this, the vaginal swab is done by heading a little bit more dorsally than ventrally in the vaginal wall. And also make sure the swab is in a little bit, even on smaller dogs, because you don't want the beginning cells just inside the vulva. You want the ones that are basically lining the vagina. So you want to roll the swabs in there. We like to use sterile swabs, and then make a couple tire tracks on your clean glass slide, and then it's just treated like a blood smear. So air dry and diff quick. And it's not a single slide, usually a process or getting several days worth. It's really important that the breeders understand that they notify the clinic at the first sign of vulvar swelling so that you can get a baseline vaginal cytology. And what you'll usually do is, I'll try to move this up a little bit. What you usually do is try to get these guys in on early proestrus and then gauge the vaginal cytology until about 50% of the cells are starting to look like this. And that's usually when progesterone testing is started. So I'm just going to stress to you right now that in the old days we did vaginal cytology primarily, but quite realistically, breeders are going to want progesterone testing too to get an optimum breeding time for their dogs. The canine estrus cycle consists of anestrus, which is about a 4 to 5 month dormant stage where nothing's happening, and the next stage is proestrus, which is approximately 9 days long, but it can be shorter or longer. And in this stage, proestrus, those nice, plump, young basal and intermediate cells, this is early proestrus, so there they are right now. As they go into mid-estrus, you can see that they're becoming more angular, more pycnotic. I would still not call these cornified yet, but once they start to really lose their nice cytoplasm, and we start to even lose some nuclei, such as this, we're really getting into a late stage proestrus. So somewhere in here, we'd like, between mid and late, we'd like to get these guys on a progesterone testing situation. So that's basically how the cells look. I pulled this other picture in because it's the last stage. So We talked about the stages we're concerned with in this class are proestrus, estrus, and medestrus, or also called diestrus, which would be a stage where the female no longer accepts the male and is no longer fertile. So your the estrus pictures, we just saw those right here. Once estrus is over, diestrus or medestrus, the non-fertile stage starts, and it is depicted by the reemergence of these nice plump young basal cells and also neutrophils to kind of clean up the mess. So those are the stages you should be concerned with this week, both in lab and lecture. Proestrus, which is a phase or a process of going from, early cells all the way through cornified cells, and then the abrupt start of medestrus or diestrus, where the cells reemerge as young non-cornified cells with neutrophils to clean them up. Here's the basic hormone picture of the canine estrus cycle. And over here is just the beginning of proestrus is about 9 days long or 13. So somewhere in here, estrogen starts to rise. It then stimulates the LH or luteinizing hormone to peak, called the LH surge. And after the LH surge, progesterone starts to rise when the LH is stimulated, and it starts to go straight up once the LH surge has occurred, because ovulation occurs right at the end of LH surge. Remember, in the canine, the egg takes a couple days to mature, so you have a couple days here to get the dog bred. So also remember that canine sperm will stay alive up to 7 days, which is longer than most mammals in the female reproduction tract. So breeding them here in this stage right here is pretty important. The progesterone testing will tell you a lot on that, because progesterone will get a baseline prior to proestrus of them having 1 nanogram to 1 milliliter. And usually when we get these guys in on about day 5 of their proestrus, they're always showing signs, the vulva swelling, there's a discharge. You're going to get usually less than 2 nanograms per milliliter, and at this point you have about 4 days longer. At 2 to 4 nanograms per milliliter, the breeding should start within 2 days, and greater than 5 nanograms per millimeter, the breeding should be done immediately. After it's gone to greater than 15 nanograms per millimeter, reevaluation of the situation needs to occur. So that's kind of how the hormones go. Progesterone remains low until ovulation, and then if the dog is bred, it stays high all the way to whelping, and it falls usually 36 to 48 hours before whelping. That's your temperature change in the bitch that's going to have puppies. So right before whelping, their temperature will drop, and that's when the progesterone's dropping too. This is also a good indicator of veterinarians will also use this to determine when to do C-sections on certain breeds that have C-sections all the time. So it's kind of interesting. So kind of remember your hormones, with the estrogen being the catalyst here early, and then the LH surge, and then after that, progesterone kind of leads the way through estrus. And then after that, when we go into medestrus, everything falls if they're not pregnant. On a side note, prior to me doing the quiz over this week, there were 3 questions on cats and breeding, which none of it was in the reading or in the course. So I took those questions out of the quiz, and I'm not going to ever quiz you on them, but I do think that you all should remember this information for your boards that are coming up. We don't usually have a lot of trouble with cats being breeders, as you all know. Remember that they're seasonal breeders, so typically they breed in the spring and the fall, and they're induced ovulators. So they are not going to release an egg from the ovary unless they are mated. So if they're not mated, no ovulation. the estrus cycle then returns in 1 to 3 weeks, and basically you guys know that they just kind of cycle over and over again. Another thing to remember is they don't shed their uterine lining, so there is no bloody discharge in the feline. Again, I'm not testing you on this, but just good information. You probably will be asked that again on your boards. I have really simplified this, probably oversimplified it, but that's the information that we want you to know this week on reproductive cytology. Evaluation of semen is mentioned briefly in the reading. I would just say also that for the most part, clinics will do the live to dead ratio and motility evaluation in clinic because spermatozoa has to be so carefully handled and it just doesn't hold up going to the lab. There are cytologies that you can send out on it, but a lot of this is done in-house. So morphology is done on a slide like a blood smear of spermatozoa, but motility and live to dead would be basically wet mounts, and they're done pretty immediately after collection. That's it.